Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for tonight's program. Behind the Books, 5 North Carolina creators talk writing and illustrating for kids. My name is Talia. I'm the events manager at Flyleaf. If you're new to Flyleaf, I encourage you to browse our full events calendar by clicking the Flyleaf Books logo above us. I've been busy adding listings to the calendar for the spring and summer seasons, and there are many more to come. So please be sure to follow us on Crowdcast so you don't miss anything. If you'd like to support Flyleaf and our guests, please keep in mind that books from all of our featured creators tonight are available from Flyleaf. We're open for browsing, so you can come in to shop or click the link just below our faces to buy your copies. All right, I will go ahead and introduce our guests tonight. First up, 2021 Piedmont Laureate Kelly Starling Lyons is a teaching artist and award-winning children's book author whose mission is to transform moments, memories, and history into stories of discovery. She has published more than a dozen titles for children, many of which have received starred reviews, Junior Library Guild selections, and more. Some of her recent publications have been the nonfiction picture book Sing a Song, the Jada Jones series of early chapter books, and the Leveled Reader series Ty's Travels. Thanks so much for joining us, Kelly. She is gone, but she'll be back. All right, next up, John Claude Bemis is the award-winning author of 7 books for young readers, including The Wooden Prince and The 9-Pound Hammer. He was a Piedmont Laureate in 2013, and he's also received the Excellence in Teaching Award from UNC Chapel Hill for his work as an author educator. Based in Hillsborough, John leads writing workshops and story consultations. Thanks so much for joining us, John.
Glad to be with you all. Thanks.
Next up, Donna Washington is an internationally known master storyteller, artist educator, and published author who's been performing for audiences of all ages for over 30 years. Is that echo? Just hold on 1 second. I'll be out in a sec. Donna has been featured at numerous festivals, schools, libraries, theaters, and other venues around the world, and her storytelling has been recorded on 11 award-winning CDs. She's also the author of 4 children's books, and her 5th, Boo Stew, will be out in fall of 2021, and that one is available for pre-order at the link just below our faces. Donna lives with her husband and 2 cats in Durham. Welcome, Donna.
Thank you.
It happens. We'll figure it out as we go. All right. Hold on 1 second. Next intro is Clay Carmichael. Clay is the author illustrator of the picture books Bear at the Beach, Used Up Bear, and Lonesome Bear, and the middle grade and YA novels Wild Things and Brother, Brother. Her books have been published in many languages. She lives with her sculptor husband, Mike Roig, in Carborough. Welcome, Clay.
Hello.
And our last featured creator tonight, certainly not the least, Jacqueline K Auburn is the author of 10 picture books and a middle grade novel for children, The Unicorn in the Barn. Her books have earned starred reviews and have been translated into Korean, French, Greek, and Japanese. Jackie grew up in Winston-Salem and worked in New York in book publishing for 10 years. She and her husband now live in Durham, where she writes and works at Duke. Welcome, Jackie.
Yes, nice to be here.
All right, so thank you all so much for joining us tonight. To keep the focus on our guests, I'm going to minimize my screen and let them talk to each other about children's book creation and all of their incredible work. If you're watching in the audience and you think of a question you'd like to ask any or all of our guests, you can drop that in the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of your screen, and I will pop back up at the end of the event to read those questions out loud to our guests. Okay, so we're going to get started. I am going to get Kelly back on screen, but in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and mute my audio and video and just let everybody say hi. If you want to talk a little bit about your work or anything like that, you're welcome to go ahead and jump right in.
Okay.
Well, my friends, how are we tonight? So good to be with you all. I know Kelly's coming in just a little bit. And for those that might not know, she's our Piedmont Laureate for Children's Literature. Which is, woohoo! Yes, which is such a huge honor in the North Carolina literary community. So,
John, tell us about that.
Well, I will. I think I know that Kelly might have have shared a little bit more, and she'll be able to chime in some. But while we're waiting for her, the Piedmont Laureate program is a program that was started. It's a joint collaboration between the various arts councils. Kelly, you ready for me to send it over to you? I was just starting to tell a little bit about the Piedmont Laureate program.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm sorry we're having some tech issues. I'm so excited to be here with creators that I admire and have inspired me, and I also consider friends. So this program is part of my being Piedmont Laureate, which such an honor. And John Claude Bemis was the first Piedmont Laureate to focus on children's literature. So I'm really blessed to follow in his footsteps. The program is really a way to bridge the literary focus, which for this year's children's literature, with the community. So I'm going to be having lots of different events that feature children's book creators from around North Carolina. We are so blessed to have amazing, award-winning authors and illustrators here. So I really want to shine a spotlight on their work. I'm also going to be celebrating diversity in children's literature. I think it's really important for all kids to see themselves in children's books. And finally, I'll be thinking of ways to help you out there find your voice and think about, do you have stories that might lift children? Are there kids that want to make sure their stories are heard? So I'm really excited and honored to be able to be part of the wonderful Piedmont Laureate program. This event is sponsored by the Orange County Arts Commission, Flyleaf Books, Chapel Hill Public Library, and Orange County Public Library. So we thank all of them for their support. One thing that all of us have in common, we have many things in common, is that we're part of an organization called WINK, Writers and Illustrators of North Carolina. If you are beginning your children's book journey, or you've been in it for a while, you may have heard of SCBWI, Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, but maybe you don't know as much about WINK. It's a really special organization that is full of professional writers. All of us have 2 or more books. It's a community and a fellowship where we can talk about the business, share successes, talk about challenges. So I would love to open it up by having Clay and Jackie share, how did WINK come to be and what makes it so special?
So Clay, do you want to start?
You start, Jackie.
Okay. All right. Well, WINK came about because there were a whole bunch of us from the Triangle that got invited to this program in South Carolina at the library school. And several of us carpooled down there, and they put us up for the night. And I said, the best part will be the next morning at breakfast when we get to talk to each other, which it was. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to talk about what we'd just been through and what worked and what didn't. And I realized that even though SCBWI was really wonderful, it focused a lot on being a writer and getting published. But there wasn't a place where we could talk about the problems of being published, the things that you had to deal with after you had a book come out. What I call being an author as opposed to being a writer, things like, what's a good contract? Do you really need an agent? My editor's driving me crazy. Can I tell her that I'm not going to do this? All of those kinds of things. So we started meeting once a month in each other's houses and just talking about all these things. And we went through a couple of different names before we settled on Writers and Illustrators of North Carolina. So that's it in a nutshell. And we did decide to limit it to people who'd been published.
Thank you, Jack.
So, Clay?
Clay, is there anything you want to add?
No, just that it's a good group for people who are at mid-career, because you think that you don't, when you first start out, you think getting published, I won't have any problems after I'm published. And it's just not true. And so it's a good place once you are published to get some help, because SCBWI is wonderful, but it's better for those who are just starting out. And it works much better for them than it does for those of us who maybe have 1 or 2 or 3 books and wonder what's next. Do I need to change publishers? That kind of thing. You just advance through your problems and your challenges as you keep publishing.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. And I think at different stages, all of us have been SCBWI members. I'm an SCBWI member still, and it's been with me through my whole journey. I just love too having Wink as this, just fellowship of writers that are here in our state. And I want to encourage teachers and librarians who are looking for folks to come for author visits to use us as a resource. But I want to take it back a bit. I know we have people that are joining us who are thinking about writing for kids, who may be early in their journey. And I love hearing stories of how people came to this important work. So if we could talk for a minute about what called you to write children's books and what was your path to publication. That's open to anybody who wants to start.
Okay, well, I'll start. I was always a writer, and I got my degree in creative writing from UNC, and I wrote a lot of poetry, which turned out to be great preparation for writing picture books because it's distilled language where every word counts. And right after I graduated, my father got Parkinson's disease, and I was the main caregiver. And it was an upsetting time for me. And so I started to draw little pictures and write a story about the things I loved about my dad, because that's where my mind was focused then. And my friends looked at it and they said, you ought to make a little book out of this. And so I did. And nearly 3 years later, and a lot of hand-wringing later, and a lot of phone calls later, my first book came out, Bear at the Beach. That's how I got started.
That's amazing. Love that. And I love how, when we talk to one another about our paths to publication, often it comes from some moment that's personal, that we connect to, that we know kids would also connect with, and be able to be made richer by reading our stories. For me, my call to children's books was when I was, I hear a wicked echo. Hopefully that'll go away. Okay. I was a journalist before I wrote children's books, and I was working for Ebony Magazine in Chicago. And I got a book across my desk called Something Beautiful, picture book by Sharon Dennis Wyeth. And immediately looking at that girl on the cover with her sweet face and volleys and barrettes, how I used to wear my hair too, drew me into the story, read the book, and was blown away by the author positioning this child as an agent of change and showing how she could create beauty in her own life and in her community. And that's what called me to write for kids. And also the idea that it's important for all kids to see themselves. Though I was an adult when I saw Something Beautiful, that was only the second children's book I saw with a Black girl on the cover. And so I wanted to be part of creating a change and making a difference. And I began to write. And my first 2 books were published by Just Us Books, a Black-owned publishing company in New Jersey. One was a chapter book, one was about the Million Man March. And those were stories that were drawn from my experiences as a journalist, going to the march and seeing a girl there with her father and seeing the power of that day. Eddie's ordeal from a civil rights bus tour I took as a writer for the News and Observer. Who else wants to share?
I would, but apparently I'm a ghost. So I'm like, woo. Okay. Yeah.
One second, Donna. Nobody has headphones in, right? None of you have headphones in? Okay, because that can cause a problem. I'm thinking, while Donna talks, I'm just going to mute everybody else, and hopefully that'll solve it. But I can handle that. So I'm gonna drop back out, but I'll handle the muting and unmuting for y'all so that we can get Donna heard. Sorry about this, everyone.
So I'm still a ghost. Yeah, and that sound's coming from here, and I don't know why. Gosh. Well, I got into writing because I was, wow, that's really loud and piercing. I'm gonna go quiet again. There's no way.
I'll hop in.
Donna, do you have the Crowdcast open and in multiple tabs, or just one tab? Okay, I think I'm gonna take your video and audio off screen, and then I'll invite you back on, and hopefully that will help. But in the meantime, other folks can go ahead and keep talking.
All right.
Sorry.
Jackie, I'll jump. Okay. So, well, my path to being a children's book author was a little bit different from, Clay said that she had always wanted to be an author. And honestly, I was not one of those people that grew up thinking I wanted to be a writer one day, and it just goes to show you how everyone's got a little different journey. But I went into education. So when I went to college, I studied elementary education. And a big part of why I wanted to be a classroom teacher was how much I loved those books from my childhood. And so there was something appealing and exciting to me thinking about, wow, I could get paid to spend my day talking to kids, reading books together, discussing them, like listening to the stories that they were writing. And that was just also enormously exciting. That after I became a classroom teacher, it was then that I started to come home and just after school and think, I want to keep writing, I want to write my own book. I want to write a book that will be as exciting to my students as these other books that we're talking about every day. And so I spent, many years. I mean, a good, even though I had written as a child, written as a teenager for fun, I really kind of just honed my skills over 10, 15 years after being in the classroom. And it was during that time that it was all just kind of writing for fun that I eventually wrote many, many books. But the first book that I wrote that I've kind of felt like was the book that I had gotten to a place that might be publishable was this book, The 9-Pound Hammer. And so, that was that journey up to publication. But, the other process that I went through, and I think that some folks who might be wanting to get a novel published are, thinking about some of those things about, should I look for an agent? Should I self-publish? Should I look for a traditional publisher? And I went the route of looking for an agent. And that's a lot of research. That's a lot of homework on its own. That's probably a whole other entire talk. Although if people have questions at the end, we might be able to tap into a few of those things. But I went that route of finding an agent who was then able to help me find a publisher. And so, Jackie, you want to say anything about your journey?
I think I'm no longer a ghost.
Oh, yay.
So do you mind, Jackie, if I go next? All right. My publishing life started kind of strangely. I left university and I was performing out in California somewhere at a conference for social studies. And I was talking about using storytelling, folklore, to teach history and to look at history by looking at not just the winners, but the folklore of the people who had to go through it who might not have come out on top. And that if you look at their stories, you can understand better the whole story of what happened. So I was out in California talking about that. And after I was done, this woman walked up to me and said, "Do you write books?" And I said, "No." She said, "You should." And she handed me a business card. And I looked at it. I didn't recognize where it was from because I was 20 nothing. And I said, "Great." And I'd been a professional for like 25 minutes. And I said, "Here's my business card." And then I flew home and I lost the card. And like a week and a half, 2 weeks later, I found it in my purse. And I called her and I said, "So you want me to write a book?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, what do you publish?" And she got really quiet and said, "I'll send you some books." And I thought, she publishes out of her basement. Who sends you a box of books? And then a week later, it arrived by courier and I opened it. And the first book was Where the Wild Things Are. And I went, "Oh, HarperCollins. Oh, so then I had to call and grovel a lot. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I had indeed thought I wanted to be a writer, but I thought I would have to get old first because I didn't think young people knew anything. And so the first couple of books that I wrote, she really kind of fostered me through the process of getting them written. And because I'm a performer and that's what I spend most of my time doing, writing has always been something that I love, that I do a lot of for myself, but I don't always think about getting published. And then at some point, my performance life got really big and I stopped writing pretty much for publication altogether. And then Harry Potter came out. And then book companies were like, your book needs to make a lot of money or we won't even look at you. At least that's what HarperCollins said. And since that's who I had mostly published with, I was like, oh, well, I guess I won't write anymore. And ultimately, I found out that was not quite right either. So my journey has gone up and down in terms of figuring out what I want to write and who I am, because I didn't come into this thinking I wanted to write. But ultimately, I figured out that inside I'm about 12 years old. And so that's who I write for.
Is it my turn? So yeah, I figure I'm about 8. You know, that seems to be my comfortable mental age. Yeah. Well, I came through it very differently. I used to joke when I worked at William Morrow in New York that I didn't want to be a writer. I was perfectly happy just working with books. Because the assistants, half of them had a novel in their drawer already, somewhere at home, or were working on the next one. But I was working in children's books and I just really loved them. And one day I heard a title and I heard it wrong and I was disappointed that wasn't going to be the book. So I went home and wrote it, which turned out to be The Noise Lullaby, which did eventually get published. The title was actually The Norse Lullaby, which I thought was a lot more boring. Anyway, so that's how it got started. And then I started writing picture books. But after a while, I kind of hit a wall, partly because picture books kept getting shorter and shorter, and my ideas kept getting longer and longer. And so after resisting it for a long, long time, I finally finished my first novel, which was The Unicorn in the Barn. Which has happily done well and is in paperback, and I'm very proud of it. And it's it's taking a North Carolina setting and has a boy who lives in the countryside who sees a unicorn going through the woods and into the barn next door, and then complications ensue, as they say. That's our backstory. So, Kelly, what should we talk about next? Oops. Oh, we lost.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hi. Can you
Yes.
hear me? Okay. I've been trying to talk, and yeah, we're still having some tech problems. Sorry, everybody. So I wanted to, while we're talking about our starts in the industry, if you could look back and kind of give yourself some advice when you were just starting out, what would you want to whisper in your own ear? What is something that would have really helped you understand the industry better, would have given you some hope during the tough times, would have, helped you have a little bit more confidence? For me, I can start off a couple things. One is all it takes is one yes. So it doesn't matter how many times you hear no. All you need is one yes to take your manuscript from something on your screen or on paper and have it begin that journey to become a book. And so you have to have faith. You have to believe that you're in this for a reason, that your story deserves to be told, you give it your heart and your all, but that faith part is what takes it the next step. And the other one, I heard this advice when I first started out from Patty Lee Gouch, who's an editor and an award-winning author. And she said, write the story only you can tell, which I repeat often. It's so important to know that who you are is where the treasure lies when you're writing, stories, like what your struggles are, your passions, your joys, your unique way of looking at the world, your family. That's where you find, so much rich, work that you can spin into stories that will empower and inspire kids. So how about you guys? What advice would you give you when you were starting out?
That writing is a roller coaster, and that, enjoy it. It's a ride.
Mm.
Sometimes it's just going, and sometimes you're waiting for the next ride to start. And that the ride itself goes from being fun to scary to anticipatory, and then sometimes it's kind of boring. But either way, it is a ride, and the payoff is you get all the way through it. You get the book done. It's wrapped. It's on the shelf. Then you wait for the ride to start again. But yeah, and even when it seems like it's not working, it's gonna keep going. You just have to take a deep breath, take a step back. The ride will start again. That's what I would probably tell myself. Yeah.
I'll jump in. That was great, Donna, and I think that's so true. I think that the advice also, I remember when I was early in this whole process and feeling very ambitious about writing and wanting to get published and kind of setting that as a goal. And that was such a great thing. I think as artists, when you're quite serious, you do have these goals that you want to set for yourself. And that's incredibly important to give you that sort of drive and something to shoot for. But the thing that I think can be really helpful, especially for a beginning author or artist of any sort, is to not get overly focused on those particular goals, because they are very momentary. You think, I just want to get published, and that's a momentary thing. You're going to get published, and then a lot of times it's what's the next thing, or you want to get a particular award, or you want to land on the New York Times bestseller list. But again, those things in some ways kind of come and go, and that you can always feel a certain level of dissatisfaction if you're kind of setting your sights on that, and that the real joy and the way to sustain it as long term as an artist is to find the joy in the everyday process, is to develop and hone a practice that is an everyday practice, that is not just something that you're doing on occasion. I think that people who are serious musicians, serious visual artists, serious writers, any sort of creative field, is that you need to be doing it every day. And if not every day, you need to be at least thinking every day about your work, putting some serious thought every day, daydreaming, imagining, working out ideas in your head, even if you're not actually sitting down at the laptop. And so it's finding that joy in the everyday. That's the important thing.
So I'll second what John just said, that daily practice is the best thing you can do. It's like what you tell your dog, sit and stay in front of that computer. And Flannery O'Connor used to say that she didn't know if the muse was going to show up, but she was there from 9 to 12 every day, ready to receive it. And that was the whole point there, is the muse is very fickle. But if you work a little bit every day, and I do this with drawings, just the same way as I do with writing, is you just keep at it. The importance of revision, and I tell this to kids, learn to love revision, because that's where the magic happens. And I know kids, they roll their eyes, oh, I have to do it over again. Well, no, you don't have to type it over again, because we have computers now. But go over it again, make it better. Make it the best you can make it. I revised my first picture book well over 100 times before it came out. It's 300 words, something like that. But it's a better book because I took that kind of time. I have never killed a story because I revised it too much. Not yet, anyway. Might happen. But revision, for me, first drafts are the hardest part, getting something down on the blank page. If I got something I can work with, then I'm happy camper.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in on that, Clay. And a lot of times kids ask me if I'm a writer, and I say a better title for me would be a rewriter. I spend most of my time rewriting, not writing per se.
And I'll jump right back at you because I tell when I go into schools, Donna, I tell what you told me one time, which was all my stories are true except for the parts I make up. Yeah. So it's a half and half thing. And sometimes it's 40%, 60%. But I always say, my friend Donna Washington says this, and I think that really,
Right.
That's it in a nutshell. And you want a story to ring with emotional content, as Rosemary Wells says. And you want to use the true parts that make your story move it forward, make it a better story, and then make up the rest. If you wrote like real life, no one would read it because it wouldn't have a good shape. It wouldn't work.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that insight. And something else I wanted to talk about, I think when people look at us as children's book creators, for some, it might seem glamorous. It's like, woo, you have this, shiny book and you get to go to schools and you get to go to different states and share your work. And oh my goodness. And I want to just kind of demystify and pull back the veil a little bit and let people get a sense of some of the tough moments. What have been some of your tough moments as a children's book creator? And then what are some of the ones that make you the most proud? I think it's important for people to really understand the determination and the perseverance and the really hard work that goes into what we do. We do it for the kids, so that's the blessing and the joy. But it is not something that's, full of glamour like we're celebrities. We're all working hard to do the best we can by our stories and by our readers. So who wants to share? What have been some of your really tough moments, and what has made you the most proud?
Probably one of the toughest things that happened was after my second book came out with HarperCollins. The person I'd been working with, Catherine Teagan, who now owns the Catherine Teagan book imprint at Harper, she basically called me and said, "You can't send things to me anymore. You have to send them through an agent or someone else. You can't send them directly to me." She's the person who gave me a business card, right? She said, "You can't do it. You have to send them third party," because that's become the policy of the book company. And she was also getting ready to open her own imprint. And I'm pretty sure she didn't want me just going, "Would you read this?" So that was really hard because it sort of felt like I didn't know anything else about publishing. I'd never gone through like the process of trying to find someone to, publish my book or anything like that. I'd never done that before. And I didn't know how the process worked. And I really didn't think I'd ever publish again. So it was a really sad moment where I thought, well, if she won't have me, I guess nobody ever will. It was really kind of depressing and sad.
Right.
But probably, and as a performer, I have kids who walk up to me with their books all the time, randomly when I'm not expecting them. But probably one of the greatest moments I had was I was performing in a library as an adult performance, and which means I don't let children in. And so this woman came up to me and she said she's had throat cancer and she hadn't been able to read to her kid, and she'd been watching me tell on YouTube for a year, could she please bring the kid in? But the librarian said no. So I sat outside with her and I read one of my books and autographed it and gave it to her. And her mother got in touch with me about a year later and just said, she loves that book. She reads that book to all of her cousins. She reads it to her grandparents. She loves that book. Thank you so very much. And having been able to have that kind of contact with someone, that was really, so that's probably one of my greatest moments.
I love that, Donna. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing the hard times too, because we all have them, right? I can remember with Tea Cakes for Tosh, when I wrote that story, I kept getting a lot of responses from editors that it was a middle grade novel. And I knew that it was not. I knew that it was a picture book, but it just wasn't connecting. So I had to keep, believing and keep, trying to really get to the heart of the story and make that come across. And there is that moment where you wonder, is this really what I'm meant to do? You might have that doubt. That's why it's so important to really believe in your work and believe this is what you're meant to do. And I was so blessed when Stacey Barney saw something in the story and acquired it as a picture book. And I think all of us, have those moments where we wonder, we have to dig deep to find the courage and the faith to keep going. And a proud moment for me was when my Jada Jones chapter book series, I had a mother of a teacher write me and say that there were some girls in her daughter's class who had been kind of bullying and they weren't being kind. And the teacher asked them, what would Jada Jones do? And they began to be kind to each other. And that meant so much to me that they, took something from the book and were able to actually use it to turn a situation around. So that's, part of why we write and what keeps us going. Anybody else want to share tough moments, proud moments?
Go ahead, Clay.
Hey, Clay, go ahead.
Oh, you're muted.
By someone one night and asked what was the single most important thing for him to be an actor, what had really come in handy for him. And he said one word, he said tenacity. And I think that that's been true for me. It's just to hang in there. And I've had so many times when before my first books came out, they sat at a publisher and they sat there and they were talking to me about them, and I call them up every now and then. And you have to understand that for a publisher, a year is nothing. They'll keep you waiting until your hair turns gray. And so I called up one day and I told, before my books were even published, and I said, you've had this book for over a year now. Do you want it or not? I said, it's time. I left that message on the guy's answering service, and I was very polite and everything, but pretty much said, you need to call me back today. And I walked out in my garden and I said to myself, I'm giving this up. I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm going to do something easier. I'm going to medical school. And that's what I decided to do that day. And I've had many, many times like that with publishing where I really had to stick up for myself. And I'm seeing some questions here that are coming in. Somebody talking about changing your story if your publisher asks you to. They're going to ask you to make changes, and some of them are going to be great, and they're going to save your butt because they'll be good advice. But there's sometimes that that they're asking you to do something that you do not want to do or you can't do. And that's when you have to stand up for yourself, and you have to know the difference. And that takes, a wisdom that I don't often possess, but I at least take a stab at it. So anyway, John?
Well, you're saying demystify, Kelly, you were talking about demystifying the whole thing of being a children's book author. But hey, I mean, we are all rock stars. I love what I get to do. So look at these people that we're with here tonight. I'm fortunate to be in this company. So, and I think anybody who is a creative, who's an artist, who's a writer, I mean, that you're a rock star right there for just doing something, being creative with your life and finding that passion and pursuing that. So, but I would say just, that there's all sorts of ups and downs. There are disappointments, like with anything. It's just all part of the journey. It's all part of life in a way. But I would say one thing that folks who aren't published might not think about, though, with that can be a disappointment. It's just that sometimes you have a book with a particular house, with a particular editor, you develop a relationship, and then the editor leaves. And, the editor, my first editor who I did 4 books with at Random House, after that 4th book, he and his wife had children, and he decided he wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. And then that can be kind of tough when you lose an editor in that way and you've developed a relationship. And it also means that your book doesn't have that champion anymore at the house, kind of looking out for your books there. So that can be tough. So, but the proudest moments, I would say, like what Clay was saying. I mean, I feel such pride in sticking with so many of these ups and downs, or like what Donna was saying, like the roller coaster ride, that just having the tenacity and the guts to go, just to stay with it through all those hard times, because it's challenging. I mean, being a working artist is a tough gig, but it's such a wonderful gig too. And for me, the real joy, the moments where I feel the most proud are not looking at sales numbers, not some review or anything like that. It's when I find out that there's some kid that either I'm talking to or his parents or his grandparents tell me how completely obsessed he is with the world. I remember how obsessed I was with Narnia, how obsessed I was with Middle Earth. And so to find out that there are, who cares how many kids? It only has to be one. If there's one kid out there who is that obsessed with the world of my books, then I'm happy. I've done it. I've done what I wanted to do. So.
Oh, and one of the best things about being an author is when you start to get mail. And you get mail from kids who have read your book, fallen in love with characters, and it's just the best thing. And sometimes they even illustrate your characters for you. It's wonderful.
Yeah. One of the pitfalls of being a picture book writer is that sometimes things happen to your book that aren't your fault. I had one book that had a contract. I had an illustrator. He's somebody who had done really wonderful work. His sketches were wonderful. And then he turned in artwork that didn't look anything like the sketches. It was just totally different. And the publisher rejected it and decided to cancel my contract too. So there I was left without without anything, and I hadn't done anything wrong. It's just that there wasn't a book there. And then that editor left, and I had another editor, and I sent her a new manuscript, and she didn't like it. She was like, "Oh, it doesn't have any child characters in it. It's not going to work." And so she turned it down. And then and it got turned down a couple of other places too, but then it landed at Houghton Mifflin, and that was the Bake Shop Ghost, which then all sorts of wonderful things happened with that book. And it still didn't have child characters. I didn't change it because that wasn't the story I wanted to tell. Yeah. But yes, and I do echo that. Yes, persistence, just a stubbornness is your best friend in this. It's just keep at it.
And I'm going to jump in again. See, I promised I wasn't going to do it. Here I am, just jumping everywhere. This is really quickly, last one. Some years ago, I decided that, actually Clay and I were talking about agents because I didn't have one. And I got published several more times without an agent, but it takes a lot of work. And I'm not a full-time writer. I'm a performer who writes. And so I decided I was going to try to get an agent. And for those of you who are asking, do you need one? It's really helpful. And I didn't know exactly how to do that. And I read a blog post from a writer basically saying that her job that year was to get 1,000 rejection letters. She says, if I can get 1,000 rejection letters, that means I have to send my piece out 1,000 times. Somebody will get, if it's worth it, someone will pick it up in 1,000. I thought, I'm going to try that to get an agent. And if that's the case, then I need to pick agents. So I researched, I found a whole list of agents, and I started sending out my pieces, and I got 3 rejection letters at an agent. So not that I recommend you try to get 1,000 rejection letters necessarily, but it really was a question of me choosing to send out the pieces, the tenacity, the deciding that you're going to take the plunge, the deciding you're going to keep at it. And so for any of you out there wondering, like, how do you do this? The answer is you do the research, you figure out what you need, or you come up with a system or some way to approach it. At least that's what I did. And you go for it. And it's not always going to be pretty. But if you keep at it and you work it,
Right.
it'll work itself out.
And could I just say one thing?
Thank you, Donna.
Is reading.
Thank you.
Is so
And I-
important. Read.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I've been asking lots of questions, and I thank everybody for their great advice and sharing their experiences. But I know we have some folks that also have questions. So if we could open it up now and take some of the audience questions.
Yeah,
Talia,
absolutely.
do
That's
you
why
have some for
I
us?
popped back up. I would love to go ahead and jump into
Great.
some questions.
Thank you.
So first up, we have from Megan. What is your approach to building different character or personality traits into the character voices of your children's books? And what are some of your favorite books that you read as a child that have inspired your work?
I can jump in on some of that. I mean, I think when it comes to developing characters, I think that just a quick little rule of thumb is, when as you're thinking about your cast, is to make sure that there are some nice contrasting features between the various characters, that we don't have too many characters that kind of fall into the same slot. That part of the fun of a cast of characters is how the various characters juxtapose against one another, that we have that we just have nice contrast, nice variety amongst them, just like you would with, that you want dynamics in music, you want, light and dark and all that kind of stuff in visual representation. And so that thinking about the characters and then deciding, like, if I have this one character, my main protagonist is a very kind of quiet, shy, introverted character, then it can be nice to figure out, like, well, what would be a good character that could play off of them, that would be a big, boisterous, loud extrovert. So.
Yeah. And to build on what John said, I think that voice is a great way to distinguish characters, thinking about unique ways that all of us speak and express ourselves that can help kind of really make a character stand out to a reader, as well as their emotional reactions to different situations. But I think it's important to show emotion and show how different people handle different moments. Some may use humor, some may show more sadness, but really kind of delving into what makes that character tick. And the other part of the question was books that have helped to inspire us. Really, when I think about my children's book journey, I draw from when I first the world opened up to me of diverse children's literature. My favorite picture book author is Jacqueline Woodson. And so my favorite book of hers is Coming On Home Soon. And that is one where I feel like she handles the idea of loss just so in such a seamless way, and she really delves deep in the emotions of the character. I love stories that kind of hit you in the heart. So that's one that has really helped to inform the stories that I write.
I grew up in a family that loves fantasy, Tolkien, all of it. And we read them out loud at the dinner table from the time we were kids. My dad read them to us. And my father also told us all of our Greek mythology and Arthurian legend in first person. So, and he told us he had been there for thousands of years. We thought he was thousands of years old. So that was my sort of introduction into story. And consequently, when I write, my characters visit me. They come hang out in my head and hang out there for a while and wave at me and kind of say, I belong in a story. And then I have to go, okay, what is your story? And then they tell me what their story is. And then I figure out how to write that story. So that's usually how I approach writing. It's incredibly visual. And before I ever get pen to paper, they're hanging out in my head. But my favorite book when I was a little kid was What Mary Jo Shared. because it was the only book I had on my shelf where there was a little black girl on the cover. And so one of the things that's really been important to me as a writer is to create material where you see little girls who could have looked like me or now my daughter, so that there are books for kids that like that. And I also want to do fantasy that has diverse characters in it, because I loved fantasy and there were just not that many books for kids that had little black girls who were the heroes of those things.
Clay or Jackie, you want to?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. The picture books, it's like Donna said. A lot of times it's very visual, and that I get to know the characters by kind of figuring out. It depends on the inspiration sometimes. I mean, the magic nesting doll. I saw a nesting doll and thought that would create a wonderful, magical object in a fairy tale. That you open it up and you get something, but instead of being the same thing, I made it be different things. And I read tons of Russian fairy tales to get that kind of fairy tale sound to the language, and the dynamic and things. On some of the other things, yes, I'm also somebody that sometimes the characters or the story idea will hang around for a long time until I figure it out. I don't seem to be able to forget about a story until I've actually written the whole thing out. And books, one of the books that I loved as a child was A Wrinkle in Time. So yeah, it was a girl with glasses who had a lot of siblings just like me, and even though I was the oldest, I felt sort of overwhelmed by my sister and three little brothers who were all much more extroverted than I was, and so I identified with Meg a lot, and that was one of the first books that I bought for myself through the Scholastic Book Club. It's one of the first books that I bought for myself. So.
I hear my characters before I see them.
Great.
And when I'm writing dialogue, I'm walking around the house talking to myself. And if I can't figure out what they're saying, I walk outside till I can. And because only the sane people in my family talk to themselves. The crazy people never talk to themselves. And I also want to say that when you're working on a story or a novel, reading it out loud is a really big help. It will tell you where the story's not working. It'll tell you where it's dragging, or at least it does me. And it even helps you to find the where you need to change your punctuation, where your stops should be, and the misspelled words. And I don't spell very well. So there's just a lot of value in the hearing part for me.
And I'm going to be rude and bump in again and say, I have a new book coming out in September called Boo Stew. And it was, the characters for that came from my children. Yay! At the breakfast table, telling each other stories. And Boo Stew is a piece based on Goldilocks and the Three Bears, only you could call it Curly Locks and the Three Scares. And there is a triumphant young black young lady on the cover who is Curly Locks. Just thought I would throw that out there. It's a great book.
Love it. Yes.
We're so excited about that one.
Okay, Talia. I know we have a lot of. I know we have a lot of questions, and time is running short. So if you want to do lightly and ask a question, and one of us will answer, get through as many as we can.
Yeah, sure. That's a great idea. Okay, so I have a question here from Stacy, who says, I'm about to teach a class in children's book illustration. Is there anything new in kids book publishing in the last 5 years that I should tell students? I'm gonna point that one to Kelly.
I'm actually going to hand it off to Clay, who is our author illustrator.
Yeah, go for it, Clay.
Well, I would just say, and I'll say it again, read as many books as you can. I mean, park yourself down now that we can get out in the world a little bit. Go down to Barnes & Noble, put a mask on, and just sit there and pull them off the shelves and read as many as you can. You can sit there and read them for free. You can do it you can't do it currently at my local libraries, but you can go into bookstores and do it. Go down to Flyleaf and do it. Pull them off the shelf. Are you open?
Yep, we're open.
Yeah, and read them there, and let them let the picture speak to you. And then when you get ready to send your books out to people, send them to the people whose names are on the spines that publish books that you loved. And that's where you can find what's new, and you can probably get some very good ideas that you can bounce your own ideas off of too. And you'll see what's new there, I think, faster than you could anywhere else. I read so many books. I have far more. They avalanche in my house all the time. I read more than, I have more than I can possibly read. But it's the same with novels. It's just keep reading it, and you'll see what's new, and you'll see what's happening out there in the world. Publishing world is really changing in ways that Donna and Kelly have touched on. They've become a lot more diverse recently, and it's a wider world, and that's a blessing.
Thank you,
so
Clay.
much.
Wonderful answer.
Yeah,
Okay, Talia, what's next?
Next up, we have a question from Jada, who says, I've been doing puppetry and illustration. I'm also a poet. I've been entertaining the thought of merging puppetry with children's books. Where do I start? And I think Donna might be the best one to answer that from a performance perspective. And I think Donna might be the best one.
Well, only if you're not talking about illustrating, because I can't draw. That might be a Clay thing. But just in terms of merging puppetry and illustration, picture book writing. One of the things about performers is that we do not sound like picture books. If you write a picture book that's meant to be out loud, which is one of the things that I try to work really hard to do, and I call them true voice picture books. I can pick it up, open it, read it off the page, and it doesn't sound like you're reading a book as much as it sounds like you're telling a story out loud. That is a really hard thing to do, but it really makes a story translate well for an audience in a library. One of the things I can say is librarians love my picture books because you can get them right off the page and it sounds like you're telling a story and not necessarily reading. So if you're talking about merging those two, look to find ways to make the words flow directly as if you were speaking, not necessarily as if you were writing. And then you have to go back and make it fit in a book. So if you write in true voice, it's a multi-step process because you can't just write as you speak. That would never work. But you have to find a way to sort of merge those two things so that you're giving us a written, spoken experience. And I think that would be very true of some way to deal with puppetry. You can bring that off the page.
I just want to say that John wrote a couple of books about a puppet, about Pinocchio. So he might want to comment on this.
He did.
I did. That does not at all help on this question.
Well, I was just going to chime in with really quickly. There's a Center for Puppetry Arts in Georgia, and they have adapted some picture books, including Ruth and the Green Book, to be a puppet presentation. So you might want to check them out and see how they were able to translate the picture book experience to the puppetry stage. But hey, Jaghetto, I know you're Pittsburgh proud. Okay, Talia.
Yeah. Something else that picture book writers need to remember is you're writing it for somebody else to read out loud. And so part of the things I would do is get somebody to read it to me to hear where the places that it was easy for me to say, but it wasn't easy for somebody else to say.
Jackie taught me that.
Donna,
Okay, Talia, what else do we have?
Yeah, sure. I have a question here from Debbie who asks, is there a way to show illustrations as art, perhaps create gallery space within a bookstore? Clay, do you want to take that one?
You know, I do this all the time now. You can see in back of me, these are not illustrations from books, these prints that are back here. I do art that children can appreciate. I'm the baby gift capital of the world. I have a whole line of like 300 greeting cards that we open our house up, my husband is a sculptor, and when we open up the house for open studios, and also in various venues around town, I sell my cards and my prints. And so you don't always have to write a whole book, which is great, because writing and illustrating a book usually takes me a year at least. And that's a lot. I mean, it's usually 50 illustrations, and if you include the spot illustrations, and it takes a long time. So yes, do it and get it out there. You might have to get to know your way around a computer and scanner and Photoshop, but you can do it. I did it.
Yeah, I would like to add, just as a consumer of art, not an artist, but I follow a ton of illustrators on Instagram, and I've seen how powerful that tool can be to build a following of people who know your work. And then I've seen art of people who I know them from Instagram, and I've seen their work on jigsaw puzzles and greeting cards and in books. I think the more exposure you can get from that venue, it just opens tons of pathways if you're able to gain an audience, even on just social media. Okay. There are a couple more questions, but I think that we mostly answered them in the conversation we had already. So I just want to wrap it up with one sort of final question I've asked at a bunch of recent events that I think is always really interesting. Is there anything that each of you would like to promote that you either have out or is about to come out? Or if you don't have a current book or project in the works, something else you'd like to promote, a friend or colleague or whatever, something you're excited about. And then what are you reading right now? So two-part question. Let's start with Clay.
Well, I'll just start with just recent news is that my book, Wild Things, which Flyleaf is offering for sale, has just sold film and TV rights. And so maybe nothing will happen about that, but it's in the works now. Somebody is trying to do that. So that's news for me. What am I reading? Oh, I just got this one I got the new Meg Rossoff today, The Great Garden by Meg Rossoff. So that's what I'll be reading a little bit later on. And I just finished Firekeeper's Daughter, which is a new YA, which I liked, about Native American experience, a coming of age story. And the Obamas are going to produce that for Netflix. So it was a pretty good book. Probably you've got that in your store, don't you?
Definitely. John, you want to go next?
Yes, my next project is not going to come out till 2022, but it's going to be a graphic novel called The Daughters of Mayhem. And so I am finished with the writing portion of it. The London-based illustrator Nicole Miles is going to be handling the illustration work. So, but in the meantime, if you are a fantasy adventure kind of fan, 9 Pound Hammer or my Pinocchio reimagining, The Wooden Prince, fun fantasy adventure kind of stuff that you could find at Flyleaf Books. And the book that I just read, just finished this morning actually, and adored it, is the house at the Cerulean Sea, and it was just dynamite. It's a funny book that I would think that it is technically an adult book, but it feels like it is written like a middle grade book. It has this kind of warm, youthful kind of tone to the book that is very sweet. So timeless, ageless, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that book. That book is so much fun. All right, Jackie, you want to go next?
So out in paperback. Like I said, it has a North Carolina angle. I also got news recently that my picture book, Little Treasures, they're going to make into a board book. So that's going to be interesting. Little Treasures is endearments that parents use with children in different languages. So that'll be kind of fun. And then I'm sort of, I don't know, we'll see what happens next.
And anything you're reading lately that you're enjoying?
Reading? Oops. Come on. I'm reading a nonfiction book called Monster, She Wrote, and it's a series of essays about the women who basically invented fantasy literature. Mary Shelley and people like that, and there are a lot more of them than you would think. Mary Shelley, but fantasy and horror literature was basically invented by women. And it's an academic book, but I'm finding it really fascinating.
Awesome. Kelly?
My next book is part of my Ties Travels Easy Reader series, and it's called Beach Day, and it comes out May 25th, and I'm real happy about that. And also, I have a new book that comes out in November. It's called Jada Jones Skywatcher, and that is a tribute to stargazing and her admiration for the first Black woman astronaut, Dr. Mae Jemison. And what am I reading? I read so many things, just a few. One that I love is called We Are Still Here, Native American Truths Everyone Should Know by Tracy Sorrell. I think that should be in every classroom, every library, every home. There's so much that we need to know. Also, Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. I love that book so much, a celebration of Asian American beauty and heritage and culture. And then lastly, Escape from Hurricane Katrina by a dear friend of mine, Judy Allen Dotson, who's a debut author. And it talks about the storm of Hurricane Katrina and the storm in these twins' lives, having a mother who is coping with cancer. And I just think she just, handled everything very sensitively. And it's a really engrossing story that can empower kids.
All right. And Donna?
As I said before, Boo Stew is coming out this September, and it's you can get advanced sign up for copies of it. It's a really lot of fun. It's a retelling of Goldilocks and Three Bears, but in Toadsuck Swamp. It's a lot of fun. My agent actually is at this point peddling my first fantasy novel for middle grade kids. And it's about dragons who morph into humans or humans who morph into dragons in boarding school. And so that's fun. And she really loves it. So I'm hoping that we'll get some nibbles for that. And other than that, I don't have any new recordings coming out the next year, but I will be touring live again starting the fall. So that is something that has been really neat. And we have done so much virtual storytelling over the last year that we've actually made it part of the business so that I can work virtually all over the world and pre-recorded sessions. So you can rent a pre-recorded storytelling session as a package. And then I don't have to be anywhere I could be anywhere else doing whatever else. And those are going to continue to run. So it's been a great year for virtual live performance, I guess.
Yeah.
And so that's what's mostly going on with me right now.
So exciting. All right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I have a few quick reminders before we close out the event tonight. If you'd like to buy any books from any of our authors featured tonight, you can click that green link just below our faces. And there is a list at the bottom of that webpage that has tons of books by all of these authors, and you can just add them all to your cart, Buy them all if you want. I encourage you to do so because these folks are all so wonderful. I'm also going to work on, once we wrap up, I'm going to pull the recommendations that we just got from the authors of books that they're reading and enjoying, and I'll drop those links in the chat. So if you refresh right after we finish, I'm going to pull those and have those clickable links for you to shop for those books from Flyleaf. Also, if y'all are children's books fans, which I assume everyone watching is, we have a few events coming up in the next week or so that I think will be really exciting to you. So on Wednesday, this Wednesday, I believe it's May 5th, we are hosting a panel with several authors of the Unicorn Rescue Society books. So we have Adam Gidwitz coming, Emma Otegi, Joseph Bruchak, David Bowles, and Henna Khan. So that's an amazing panel. I'm so excited to host those folks, and I hope that you all can join us for that. And then I believe next weekend, not this coming weekend, but the following one, May 15th, Saturday, we have an afternoon event with Kwame Mbalia and Prince Yoel Makonnen of Ethiopia for their new book, Last Gate of the Emperor, which is a sci-fi story with African roots. So we're really excited about that one as well. If you would like to tune into any of those, we would love to see you, as well as any of your kids. Those events will both be very kid-friendly, and so we would love to see you there. All right. I would like to just once again say thank you to our co-sponsors for the evening, the Piedmont Laureate program, as well as the Orange County Arts Commission and the Chapel Hill and Orange County Libraries. Thank you so much for helping us put this event together. It's been a lot of fun. And of course, thank you so much to Kelly, John, Jackie, Donna, and Clay, and everyone watching tonight. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Holly. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.